Hey everyone, I've been seeing a ton of Kale recently. Every single game is the same, gets to late and she's an absolute monster. It made me realize that especially this season, playing for late game is a bit easier when we have huge bounties to collect and there are just some champions that are way more suited to it. We've done this before with like early game champions, so today we're going to look at 4 late game monsters from every single role that you definitely do not want to see with 6 items. Just a reminder as well, the next quarterback season is underway now and we managed to keep our 3rd place last spot, so thank you a ton to everybody for playing. This week is the same. If you can break into top 100 in the club, you get a bunch of extra coins. Once you've joined my club, you just have to have the app running. You pick a challenge before each game, play like normal, get coins and use them for skins, and there's a link down below to join mine right now. So today we're going to start with the reason for this video, even though Kale is pretty different to most because it's kind of related to her level and not so much the items that you get. Obviously getting more items is even more damage, but it's that level 16 mark where you're permanently exalted, which means more attack speed and perma waves dealing a bunch of damage, which is now true damage. Basically it's kind of too much to cope with, especially considering it can hit more than one person, and she's definitely like the new version of a hyper carry. Her late phase is really weak to compensate, but if you don't put her behind, she is going to scale. She'll bend you over, and whether you enjoy that or not, you'll probably lose the game either way. Vlad is another one where it's partly skill ranks actually, but mostly synergy with items that can cause a massive issue in the game. If you play anything damage focused, AD carry, mid mostly I guess, and don't have a lot of health or defense, you're probably really afraid already of a late game Vlad. His damage is easily enough to one-shot you when he charges E, flashes in, puts his ult down, and that's why he's in his pool as well, with 0 way to fight back. The only issue for Vlad is getting close enough or getting fights as well, but late game at 6 items, almost all of these games will be decided by a big team fight. Jax doesn't really need an explanation, let's be honest. He scales really well. His whole kit revolves around putting more power into his auto attacks. This is one where you should be afraid of him getting out of control and being in a position where you don't have an answer anymore. It's a bit different, but it's not so much about killing you, even though he probably will and he probably can. It's most likely going to get to a point where he can 1v1 your top laner, and that's when he starts to take towers or inhibs pretty easily. You have to then kind of choose, either go help and shut him down or fight his team, but either way, it makes the game much harder than it needs to be, especially in solo queue. Split push is so hard to play against. So one you probably didn't expect, that it's a bit of a wild card I guess for top lane. AB Temu is actually got an insane win rate because of his shrooms late game. They deal a really good 450 damage each, plus 50% of his AP at level 16, which when he has like 600 AP means you start the fight with half health or less. The blind can also be game changing to shut down the AD carry during a team fight. Those seconds actually make a big difference, but basically late game it's more about playing around objectives, which will all be shroomed in a minefield, and that's why he's so good. So let's move on to AD carries, and just to say, yes, most AD carries will have a pretty good late game because that's the way they're built, but some are just way better at it. Vayne is part of the reason that I think people assume all AD carries are late game machines because she rips through everybody. She can dip a little bit super late game depending on if she's against high range or huge AoE damage, but if given any sort of time really in a fight, she will stack a rage blade and go nuts. Having percentage true damage, obviously late game is amazing, plus stealth means you can't really focus her very easily, but you can't stay near her very long either before you die. The thing with Vayne as well is that she doesn't really have to build full damage to kill you. Like other AD carries will have to build 6 damage items and you can shut them down a little bit. She will have maybe 2 defensive items most games to stay alive. Now Twitch is the opposite of that, extremely high range and will demolish your entire team, not just one person, but nobody really plays him anymore. This is why a Fed Twitch is so deadly. He bursts and is like an assassin, but his ultimate and runins will shred people behind that first target. The stealth means that you can't really focus him unless he massively messes it up. You'll never really know where he is until he's out and he's ready to go and ready to start the fight. Even though yes, he can get very up close and he can hit everybody, he can also just be extremely safe at the back with high range during his ultimate, hiding behind his entire team, which again makes him very difficult to get to. Now Kai'Sa is a little bit different. Her damage is good, but it's more about everything else that she brings to the table as well as the damage. Late game, you're going to have really good ability damage. You'll have burst, you'll have consistent damage through your passive and your auto attacks, as well as all of the crits from your items. You'll also have your stealth, which means you can dupe people around, you'll be really hard to focus and actually lock onto, plus your ultimate to either assassinate or keep yourself alive. So again, it's just a little bit different, but very good late game. This one might sound a little bit weird, like why is Xayah here and not a Caitlyn or something like that, right? It's all because of her W. It's something that other AD carries just cannot keep up with at all. It gives you 4 seconds of 50% bonus attack speed and causes your basic attacks to strike for another 20%. This is why you have 100% crit builds on Xayah, and those crits hit really hard late game. A 20% boost is massive, plus you crit more because of the attack speed as well. Then you have your AoE damage, you have your ultimates to keep yourself safe, you have the root. It's actually a massively underrated full build champion. Let's move on to our mid lane now, and Cassian is kind of like the Kayle of mid lane. Scales with levels and that sweet 16 for rank 3 of your ultimate, but it is also items, right? Probably a little bit less with the levels compared to Kayle, but more with how many items you have in the game, since his AP ratios are actually really good. The reason level 16 means so much is because your jump becomes a 2-second cooldown, it deals more damage, and even more damage when it's stacked. At this point as well, you'll have more mana to play with, which means more jumps, more damage actually as well. So you basically one-shot while being hyper mobile. Azir is of course another one that we don't see very often, but guaranteed if he's getting 6 items, he's ramming those soldiers right up your backside. Late game, you have 3 magical things: attack speed, AP, and spell ranks. Ranks in your soldiers mean more bonus attack speed, the AP means they hit like trucks, and the attack speed you have yourself means they're going to hit even faster. Azir is basically an AD carry with a mix of like burst, sustain damage as well, but he has such high range that unless he positions like an absolute idiot, you shouldn't ever get close to him and he'll shred you from really far away. Another one really late game as well is Cassiopeia, because her AP ratios are nuts, like 90% on her poison, and to cap it off, she can legit get 6 full items. When you have basically a free item slot, it makes sense that your late game should be a lot better because you don't have to waste one on boots. Think of it kind of like Twin Fangs are sort of auto attacks that late game is you spam obviously, but you've also got your slows and your burns at that point. Your Miasma, your W, is a huge zoning and teamfight tool, and that alone will get you objectives and wins if you use it smartly. Now, Veigar is designed to scale as long as the game goes, right? With zero cap to how much AP he can get thanks to his passive. That is obviously a big part of it, but it's really his Dark Matter cooldown, his W, going down with these stacks. Every 50, he gets it lowered. So if you get 500 stacks, you're under a 3-second cooldown. The Cage, your E, that lasts 3 seconds. So if you get it low enough, you can place 2 Dark Matters and almost guarantee a hit if you place it correctly on either side of the Cage, which does 300 damage on its own plus 100% of your AP. A really underrated role for late game play is actually support. Sona is one of those really. She is like the vein of supports. She has amazing synergy with items to start with, good ratios on her abilities, but also Sensor can apply to everybody through the shielding on her W. If you think about it, she brings a lot to a team fight. She has a heal, a shield for everybody in her aura, move speed, and bonus damage for allies with her Q. That's not even considering her ultimate. The reason late game is so beast though is really because rank 3 ultimate gives a 40% reduction to her aura abilities. That means basically you face roll your keyboard and constantly spam everything during fights. Taric kind of surprised me a little bit, but his ultimate is an absolute game changer when you think about it for late game fights. With how the game has changed as well, a lot of fights are decided very quickly late game, and his ultimate is 2.5 seconds where you can dive in and not take any damage at all. He shields people for 12% of his maximum health. He gives a link person 20% of his armor. He can heal based on his max health as well, plus his stun. That is not including stuff like Knight's Vow and Zeke's as well, and all the health you're getting from that, which increases your shields and your heals. But there's actually a ton of parts to his kit that we don't think about that help keep somebody alive just outside of his ultimate. Now, believe it or not, Braum is one of the best teamfight supports in the game, and the only reason you might not think so is because Lucian can turn him into a kill lane. The passive is insane for fights late game. Almost a 2-second stun is an AD carry's wet dream when trying to fight people and peel. He can block a ton of damage anyway, gives bonus armor and magic resist to somebody that he jumps to, and then disrupts with his ultimate as well, so he is amazing to have when you get to that late game stage. Rakan is one that you might not have expected, but after his changes, especially, his late game win rate has increased quite a lot. He has some pretty good decent synergy with items, but I think it's mostly just his ultimate is a huge teamfight engage tool and something that a lot of teams will lack. When he does pull that trigger, it can catch people with their pants down, snag an entire team if they group together, and that is enough time during the charm to get a kill. Finally then, let's look at our junglers, and this is probably the second most underrated role for late game because junglers are actually pretty good late if you play the right one. Shaco, for example, if I had made this video a few years ago before Shaco had his update, I'd have got flamed really hard, but now he's actually best late game. Actually as well, one of the best champions in the entire game when it comes to winning at 6+ items. A massive part of that is because his backstab is a literal one-shot when you have enough items now, since it scales so well. But I also bet you it's because he's slippery. He can backdoor, find people, be an annoying little turd, and win the game without just killing people, though that obviously does normally help as well. Now, Master Yi is a bit different. He does it the traditional way, by stacking items and then right-clicking until everybody is dead. He scales with items insanely well, and this is why when Yi gets a few kills early, you should definitely be really afraid. Now that Conqueror also heals, it seems to be even worse to play against him late game. Like, it's even more annoying to deal with him, or at least even harder. Kha'Zix has always scaled much better than other assassins, especially junglers, but that's partly because he has a whopping 130% AD ratio on his Q, which is doubled versus isolated targets. You also got the evolutions as you go through the game, which is naturally going to add a bit of power to him as well, but it's mostly the damage that he can bring even really late. You'll notice that we haven't had many assassins in this video because they're not really what you want super late game. Everyone has defense and they're all grouped together, which makes your life a lot harder. Kha'Zix is one of the exceptions. He can find ways in, he can get relatively tanky, and has ways to survive or pick up more kills. Now finally, Evelynn is a real pain in the ass to deal with no matter what point you are in the game, but late game she doesn't even need to charm anymore. She can dash out, proc Lich Bane, ult, and you'll die. Now a lot of people don't realize that part of the reason she's so good late game is because her E does percentage health damage, which obviously scales into the game, but it's her charm really, that is the biggest part. You're probably going to have to buy a QSS to not die to get rid of that charm, which takes up an item slot, but it also shreds 30% of your magic resist, which means that she's even more deadly late game. So there you go, 20 champions you should play if you want to go late game, or if you want to smash them really hard and end before you see them at 6 items. Let me know who else you would have added here as well, but for now, I'll leave you with the robots.